So I'm feeling better about preaching right now, because who knew? It never seemed to me that preaching was really a serious job for a grown human being, but it turns out that preaching is the whole reason Jesus came around in the first place, to preach, at least according to Mark. So I gotta love that. So I'm gonna preach now. Oh, but by the way, my name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. And this is a reflection on the fifth Sunday of Epiphany readings, which are Isaiah 40 and Mark 1, 29 through 39, and a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, The Dove That Ventured Outside. So, have you ever been driving along and suddenly the punchline to a joke you heard earlier in the day suddenly makes sense? You suddenly get it. And you hadn't even realized that you didn't get it before. Or have you ever had the experience of entering a favorite haunt, a restaurant or a coffee shop, and you suddenly notice that they've changed the wallpaper or the paint color or decor or something, and then find out it happened months ago? I'm really hoping that some of you are nodding your head right now, because I'd hate to think that I'm the only one. I frequently have that same experience with the Bible. It is amazing to me that I can give so much attention to something like the Bible, and yet it comes back time and again with an unanticipated or an utterly unexpected angle on life or God or Jesus or even myself. It reminds me that we have domesticated the Bible, by which I mean we think of it as just an old book from ancient and primitive people about rules and right and wrong and moral and immoral and heaven and hell, and about an angry God versus a loving God. And if we were ever actually taught anything about the Bible, it was probably in childhood, or if as an adult, it was probably with childlike simplicity. And so, as we matured and grew and wizened up, we began to look down our noses at the Bible. It became just a book with a bunch of old stories, old Bible stories. And old Bible stories becomes a synonym for what? For not true. Oh, that's just an old Bible story. Alas, we're still confusing truth with facts, as if data and information interpret themselves and can tell us something without our telling the data what it means. We also imagine that history actually happened, when in fact history is only the interpretation of something that may have happened. We imagine that history happened, and that it happened in precisely the same way that historians tell it in modernity. But look at how differently we tell the history of Christopher Columbus now from what we told 30 years ago. I don't recall ever hearing about, as a kid, the hundreds and thousands of dead and enslaved native peoples in my early history lessons. And for that matter, the only thing I heard about slavery itself is that it happened a long time ago and Lincoln stopped it. In other words, it was told by white people arranging the data in such a way that suited their story. Was the history I was taught true? Is the history that elementary kids are taught today true? Will it be truer 100 years from now? Yeah. It's all about what we know, how we read it, what order we put it in, and how we arrange the material and what perspective we come to it with. Surely by now we recognize that there's not one definitive way to interpret history. History is endlessly interpretive.
And it will be interpreted differently depending upon what information, what ideas, and what perspectives we bring to the interpretive process. Well, of course, that's also true about the Bible. The Bible is endlessly interpretive. There's not one definitive way to interpret it. There's not one truth waiting to be uncovered in all those pages. Even the idea that the Bible is just a bunch of old stories, that it's, in other words, not true, is an interpretation. It's an interpretation rendered by an intellectual tradition that brought with it an assumption that such an ancient text and such primitive people could not hold truth. So, I want to let the dove fly the dovecote, because, as Rilke wrote, the doves that remained at home, never exposed to loss, innocent and secure, cannot know tenderness. Only the won-back heart, he wrote, can ever be satisfied. Only the won-back heart can be satisfied, free through all it has given up to rejoice in its mastery. So I want to open up Isaiah and Mark to a truth different from what often gets preached. Will it be the true one? Maybe. Isaiah 40. When we hear this prophet's song, we may imagine a gentle voice of a patient teacher asking questions as she guides her students to new awareness. We imagine that kind of voice because we have domesticated God in the Bible so that God is all about feeling good and our being affirmed by it and making nice with us. But try this version of Isaiah 40 on instead. This is God talking. How could you not know, you bumbleheads? How could you not know, you bumbleheads? How could you not have heard by now, you dingbats? How have you not understood after all this time? What's the matter with you dunderheads? I'm the Creator. I sit on the top of the world, and you and all your little animal friends all are a bunch of little grasshoppers. Who do you think brought down Hitler? Your armies? Don't be stupid. Who do you think brought down the Berlin Wall? Reagan? Give me a break. Who do you think is bringing down the United States of America? Putin? China? You've got to be kidding. I'm the Creator. Me, God. Get it? That's the way to read the little ditty from Isaiah 40, with having it drip with sarcasm, having it sting. Now, Isaiah's message or song in 40 is actually and ironically quite affirming and comforting. Because you see, it was a song or poem to exiles, people who had given up hope of rescue from their slavery and abject misery. And so Isaiah's message in 40 is, how dare you give up hope, you bunch of hapless boneheads? How dare you play victim and whine about your situation? God will give power to those who wait, and God will reverse the fortunes of the powerless. Sit up straight and pay attention, because even now events have been set in motion that will turn the world of kings and princes upside down. Now, I don't know how you heard Isaiah when it was read the first time, but it was probably with somewhat different voice underneath it. Which one is true? True or truest? I guess it depends upon how we interpret it and how our And our interpretation depends upon what assumptions that we bring to it. And our assumptions depend upon how self-aware we are. And now that's an interesting thought. But let's turn now then to the piece we heard from the Gospel of Mark. Our hero Jesus was a healer, but was he really? Did he really cure Peter's mom just by holding her hand? Did he really cure the whole city lined up at his door? Did he really? Is it true? Or is it true that no one can cure people without medicine and technology? Is that true? Is it really true, a fact, that people cannot be cured without modern medicine and technology? I'll tell you what's true about this story. Jesus may have been a healer, but that's not what he wanted to do, and that's not what he cared most about. And he was irritated and frustrated and exhausted by people who were focused on their own neediness. As dissonant as we may feel that it is with our image of sweet baby Jesus, I think the truth in this story is that Jesus was agitated. That he was agitated by how much people like us are focused on our woundedness and on our brokenness rather than engaged in active participation in the arrival of God's kingdom, an event, according to Isaiah, that's already been set in motion. The truth in this story echoes the hard and harsh voice of Isaiah's song, sung to dunderheads in exile. Are we not just as dunderheaded, you and I? Are we not, progressive Christians, also exiles? Are we not lined up outside Jesus' door just waiting to get fixed and totally oblivious as to why God is among us in the first place? That looks like truth, at least to me. Let's get out of here, Jesus says. No, he doesn't just say it. He gets up early in the morning before everybody else, and he gets the hell out of there, away from his friends who also do not understand him. Now, isn't that a great story? Doesn't it have a kind of a ring of truth to it? Too often, church people and their leadership are like Jesus' friends who track him down and plead for him to come back and fix people because that's what everybody is clamoring for. To which Jesus says, no, I want to go to the villages and preach because that's what I came for. Don't bog me down. Let me go. So here's the deal. The real issue is hearing the invitation God issues to us as individuals, to us as a community. Now, if we assume that God does not get the divine hands dirty by playing around in the mud of creation, then we don't have to wonder about this at all. That kind of remote God doesn't speak to us anyway. But assuming a remote God, a kind of amorphous other presence, whatever, in the universe, is just as big an assumption as those who pray to God to get them a new 120-inch television and entertainment center. Here's what I do. I assume God's invitation in the same way that I assume God issued an invitation to those ancients in exile. In the same way that I assume Jesus received an invitation to teach and preach. I assume God is inviting us. I assume that there is an invitation from God with our names on it. Have we heard it? Felt it, intuited it, read it, been touched by it, imagined it? As it turns out, Jesus was not invited to be an exorcist or healer, but he also didn't turn down the opportunities to use whatever gifts he had. He was invited to preach and teach. most of the good information that we have about Jesus has to do with what he taught and what he preached. To extrapolate from that, then, you and I are invited to do something too. Even though we may have many gifts and talents that may or may not be part of that invitation. We don't have to stop doing what it is we're good at or what it is that's needed for people around us, but we are invited to keep first things first. To keep first things first. What is first things for us? Not who is first, but what is first? What have we been invited to do? And how can we keep first things first and not get bogged down in all the other stuff, no matter how important that other stuff is to us? First things first? I think that's the nugget of truth in this story. Notice, please, it's a question that's endlessly interpretive. There's no one else in the whole wide world who can answer it for us. We are stuck with an endlessly interpretive question about what's the first thing for us. And I just love that it's endlessly interpretive, that there's no single interpretation, there's no single answer, there's not one definitive truth. It's one instead that begs us to leave the dove coat, to fly out, to fail if we have to along the way, and to explore what it is that we have been invited to keep first within us and for us and around us. And with that, I thank you for participating in this, and I hope that you are well and staying safe. Peace be with you.